Okay, so the Orion spacecraft. I'm at NASA's website, and I've got a few questions about this. Maybe you can shed some light or some insight. Let me point a couple things out at NASA's website for the Orion spacecraft. So, at the website, they've got an overview up here, and the first paragraph says, "For the first time in a generation, NASA is building a new human spacecraft that will usher in a new era of space exploration. A series of increasingly challenging missions awaits. And this new spacecraft will take us further than we've gone before, including Mars. Named after one of the largest constellations in the night sky and drawn from more than 50 years of space flight research and development, the Orion spacecraft is designed to meet the evolving needs of our nation's deep space exploration program for decades to come. It will be the safest, most advanced spacecraft ever built, and it will be flexible and capable enough to take us to a variety of destinations." So looking at that, when you go to the website, and I'll post a link below this video so you can go check it out for yourself. On the right hand side here, you've got some quick links to more information, and one of them is to a video. It's called "Trial by Fire." You may have seen it on YouTube. We'll get into that in a second. Um, but just quick facts about the Orion spacecraft. They've got a fact overview sheet here, you know, and again it talks the same thing about going out further than we've ever gone before, and it gives some very basic information about the spacecraft. But it seems like the more you read into it, the less it makes sense. You got to pay close attention to the terminologies that's used when they're describing things, and the fact that they'll mention things that they're trying to solve for the very first time. But apparently, we did this 50 years ago. So it's kind of confusing as to why we're looking at solving these things for the very first time. So let's take a look at the video. And there's a couple things that I want to point out on the video. And I think you'll find them pretty interesting. One thing about this video is very dramatic. So look past the music and the flair and just pay attention to what's being said.
Orion is getting ready to launch. My name is Kelly Smith, and I work on navigation and guidance for Orion. Orion is NASA's next-generation spacecraft. Built with versatility in mind, it can take astronauts deeper into space than we've ever gone before.
Okay, so did you catch that? Deeper than we've ever gone before. Um, and that's what I want to point out. Work with me here for a second, but when they say deeper than we've ever gone before, I want to illustrate the differences in the distances that they're talking about. That's the main thing I want to point out here.
Before we can send astronauts into space on Orion, we have to test all of its systems. And there's only one way to know if we got it right: fly it in space. For Orion's first flight, no astronauts will be aboard. The spacecraft is loaded with sensors to record and measure all aspects of the flight in every detail. It all begins with launch aboard a Delta IV Heavy rocket. As it punches into Earth orbit, Orion will jettison its launch abort system. The abort system is a safety feature designed to pull Orion and its crew out of danger if there were a problem with the rocket during ascent. Orion's journey is just beginning. As the spacecraft and the upper stage begin their first lap around Earth, Mission Control in Houston is monitoring the progress of the flight. Orion's over 100 miles up and going about 17,000 miles per hour. Just as it passes over the Indian Ocean, we lose communication. This is expected. The communications link we have through satellites to Orion is momentarily
Okay,
lost.
all right. So this is where it gets a little bit confusing. The communication link that they have between satellites is lost, but the satellites are up in space. So actually, Orion is approaching the same distance from the Earth as the satellites are. If anything, it seems like communication would get better. So they say that it's lost and it's expected, but why? I would like to see some information about why that signal is lost. To say it's expected is one thing, but why is it expected? It's kind of convenient that at that time is when the signal fades out. But let's watch some more.
But Orion continues to receive and process data. Its computers can handle 480 million instructions per second. Imagine you are traveling with Orion as the flight test continues. One orbit completed. Time to go. The upper stage of the rocket fires again. Like the setup for a roller coaster ride, this is the big climb we've been waiting for. We are headed 3,600 miles above Earth.
Okay. This is where it gets interesting. 3,600 miles. Remember that number, 3,600 miles above the Earth.
15 times higher from the planet than the International Space Station. As we get further away from Earth, we'll pass through the Van Allen belts, an area of dangerous radiation. Radiation like this could harm the guidance systems, onboard computers, or other electronics on Orion. Naturally, we have
so
to
when we went to the moon, did we or did we not pass through these same belts of radiation? Did they or did they not account for that radiation? And if so, what did they do to account for that radiation and to shield the astronauts from that radiation? Was there any shielding for the astronauts? It seems kind of odd how you would relate this scenario but not refer back to the original scenario at all. It's almost as if NASA wants us to believe that the first launch was an automatic success but not give us any details into how that happened and completely keep them separated. They don't want the two events connected. Let's put the past behind us. Let's forget about it. And now when we're doing this thing now, everything's new. But that's not the way things work. There's nothing that we do that we don't build off on the past and document the improvements from the past. There's no documentation of any improvements over the first manned flights to the moon. It's where it starts to fall apart. It doesn't really make sense. It's not really logical. But anyway, let's continue.
pass through this danger zone twice, once up and once back. But Orion has protection. Shielding will be put to the test as the vehicle cuts through the waves of radiation. Sensors aboard will record radiation levels for scientists to study.
Did the first flights have protection? They said that as if Orion has protection. Like, this is something new that they just come up with. You know, maybe I'm reading it wrong, but they don't allude to the form of protection at all, or any, like I said, any improvements being made or any differences between the two. It's kind of weird.
We must solve these challenges before we send people through this region of space. For this flight, it's time to head home. The upper stage of the rocket triggers separation. Orion's jets fire to turn it into the proper position to re-enter Earth's atmosphere. No matter what happens now, we're coming in. 75 miles above Earth, the spacecraft enters the atmosphere. Things happen quickly. We're now traveling more than 20,000 miles per hour. Air particles pushed out of the way heat up. An envelope of hot plasma surrounds the vehicle as it plummets towards Earth. The plasma reaches temperatures of 4,000 degrees Fahrenheit, almost twice as hot as molten lava. This may be the most dangerous part of the flight. Mission Control is monitoring all the data from the spacecraft, and then we lose communication again. No data can penetrate the plasma. Orion is on its own. Orion is inside a fireball. Onboard systems ignite jets to keep the ship pointed correctly, so the specially constructed heat shield takes the full brunt of the inferno. This is the largest heat shield of its kind ever made. Orion's computers command the spacecraft to bank like an
What's
airplane,
interesting is
keeping
we should be able to see this thing coming back into the atmosphere. Not when the parachutes have opened, not when it's low to the ground, but we should be able to see this thing cracking through the atmosphere. We should have film footage of it cracking into the atmosphere. All of this excitement that we see on the screen in front of us should be easily observed from a telescope. I'd like to see some footage of that myself, personally.
precise path to the landing site. Even though we've slowed from 20,000 miles per hour to about 300 miles per hour, we're still traveling amazingly fast. We must slow down to safely land in the ocean. Luckily, we have parachutes. Specially designed for Orion, the parachutes help us hit the brakes, but not too quickly. One day people will be aboard, so deceleration must happen in stages to keep things comfortable for the crew. The forward bay cover jettisons. Two drogue chutes deploy and slow the returning spacecraft down to 175 miles per hour. Then, the three main parachutes open.
It's beautiful.
Once fully engaged, this canopy would cover an American football field. It takes parachutes this size and strength to slow our descent to 20 miles per hour, and then splashdown. For this first flight, we won't have astronauts inside, but we still have some very precious cargo. The flight data from this mission is stored inside the Orion spacecraft. While our flight might be over, there is still a lot of work to do. Onboard sensors recorded every detail, from launch to flying in space, to re-entry to landing. Flight tests are difficult and complex, but they give us confidence that the systems we have designed work under real flight conditions. It's great to be a part of this first space flight for Orion, and we're looking forward to beginning a new chapter in human space exploration.
Okay, so here's the point. All that coordination that's necessary, all that research that's necessary, all the advancements that have been made for us to achieve this. If you note the altitude that they mentioned, it was 3,600 miles, 3,600 miles. Okay, check this out. This is the distance to the moon, or what they say the distance is anyway. 238,900 miles. Okay, now the distance, the difference between 3,000 or 36,000 miles and or 3,600 miles, 3,600 miles, and 238,900 miles is astronomical. Matter of fact, let's do the math here. Let's take the distance to the moon, 238,900, and let's divide that by 3,600. So basically, a flight to the moon is 66 times further than the distance that they talked about in that video. It's 3,600 miles we did 50 years ago. 66 times that distance, and somehow managed to thrust that ship back up to get it back to Earth. Now, you saw those rockets fire in that video. You saw them fire to redirect that ship back to Earth. So we're talking 50 years ago. We sent a ship to the moon. It's 66 times that distance, and it came back and went through all those phases of re-entry and everything else. It's just curious. Um, so please feel free to comment. I would love to hear your opinion. If you think it's possible, if you think it's doable, great. Um, but please, if you can include any information as to how that happened, how we were able to accomplish it, please do. Hope to talk soon. Peace.